The rain fell softly on the old Blackwood mansion as Thomas walked through its empty halls. The air always felt heavy there, filled with dust and silence. The house had been in his family for generations, large, dark, and filled with strange rooms that no one used anymore. But among all the rooms, there was one door that everyone feared, the locked door at the end of the eastern hallway. Thomas had lived there since his grandfather's death. He had inherited the mansion and a strange key, a small, black iron key that his grandfather told him never to lose. This key keeps the evil inside, his grandfather had said with his last breath. Whatever happens, Thomas, never open that door. He remembered those words clearly, yet they always made him wonder. What could be behind that door? Why did it have to stay locked forever? Each night, as the old clock struck midnight, Thomas would hear faint sounds coming from that part of the house, soft knocking, sometimes whispers, and once even the sound of a woman crying. The first time he heard it, he thought it was just his imagination. But over time, the sounds became clearer. One cold night, Thomas walked slowly down the eastern hallway, a lantern in his hand. The wooden floor creaked under his feet. His heart beat faster with every step. The door stood there at the end, old, black, and covered in cracks. The keyhole seemed almost alive, pulsing faintly in the candlelight. He knelt and placed his ear close to it. For a moment, there was only silence. Then a whisper, soft and slow, almost like a sigh. Thomas. He jumped back in fear. His lantern shook in his hand. Someone or something had just spoken his name from behind that door. He ran back to his room and locked his door, his hands trembling. The sound echoed in his mind, repeating his name again and again. That night, he could not sleep. The next morning, he tried to convince himself it was just a dream. Maybe the wind had passed through the cracks. Maybe his mind was playing tricks on him. But when he walked back to that hallway in daylight, he saw scratches on the wooden door, long marks, as if fingernails had clawed it from the inside. He stood frozen. Then he noticed something else, a faint smell of burned wood and iron. Thomas went to the study and opened an old chest where his grandfather's belongings were kept. Inside was a small journal wrapped in a piece of red cloth. The cover had strange symbols carved into it. As he opened it, he saw a page written in shaky handwriting. The creature must never be released. The key binds it to the house. The keeper must guard the door with his life. The words sent chills down his spine. Was that what his grandfather meant? Was there something alive behind that door? He flipped another page and found a drawing the same door, with a black shape standing behind it. Beneath it, the words, "It will whisper. Do not answer." That night, Thomas couldn't resist. He walked again toward the forbidden hallway. The mansion was quiet except for the sound of rain tapping on the windows. When he reached the door, the whispers had returned. "Thomas," the voice said again, this time softer, almost gentle. "Please, let me out." He felt a strange pull inside him. His hand moved toward the key around his neck. The cold metal burned against his skin. For a brief second, he imagined opening the door. What if someone really needed help? What if his grandfather had trapped an innocent soul? But then he remembered the journal. The creature must never be released. He took a step back and shouted, "Who are you?" There was silence. Then 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. His heart pounded. "Go away," he yelled. But the voice whispered one last time, so close it felt like it was breathing beside his ear. "Keeper, soon you will join me." The lantern flickered violently, and then went out. Thomas stumbled in the darkness, running back down the hallway until he reached his room. He locked the door, gasping for air, his body cold with fear. That night, he couldn't sleep again. He sat on his bed, holding the key tightly in his hand, staring at the door across the room, afraid that something might come through. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The whispers would return, louder, clearer, and closer. And the key he carried would soon reveal a truth far darker than he could imagine. Because in the Blackwood mansion, the keeper of the key never survives long. The next morning, Thomas woke up with heavy eyes. He had not slept even for a few minutes. The sound of that whisper, his name, so close to his ear, kept repeating in his mind. He sat up, the black iron key still clutched in his hand. It felt heavier now, almost alive. The metal was cold, but he swore it pulsed faintly, as if something inside it was breathing. Thomas walked to the mirror in his room and looked at himself. His face was pale, his eyes tired. For a second, he thought he saw something behind him in the reflection, a shadow, standing near the door. But when he turned, the room was empty. Only silence. He sighed and went downstairs. The morning light tried to fill the old mansion, but the house always looked dim. The walls were stained, the air smelled of old wood and smoke. He found his brother Jacob sitting at the table, reading an old newspaper. "You look terrible," Jacob said. "Did you sleep at all?" Thomas shook his head. "No. I heard something again, from behind that door." Jacob frowned. "You mean that door? The one grandfather told us to stay away from?" "Yes," Thomas whispered. "But this time, it spoke. It said my name." Jacob put down the paper, now serious. "You're tired, Thomas. You've been alone in this house too long. Maybe you're just hearing things." Thomas wanted to believe him. He really did. But then he remembered the scratches on the wood, the journal, and the voice that called him keeper. Later that afternoon, Thomas went to the library. He searched every shelf, pulling out books about the Blackwood family. After hours of searching, he found a thin, torn book titled The Bound Spirits of Blackwood Manor. Inside, there was a passage that froze his blood. "Each generation, a keeper is chosen. The keeper holds the key that binds the cursed soul of the mansion. The soul will whisper to tempt him, to make him open the door. If the keeper fails, the curse passes to another." Thomas felt the room spin. He wasn't imagining things, it was real. His grandfather had been the last keeper. And now it was him. Suddenly, he heard the faint sound of footsteps behind him. He turned quickly, but there was no one there. The hallway outside was empty. Yet, he felt cold air brush against his neck. Then a soft whisper echoed, not from the door this time, but from the air around him. "Thomas, it's getting dark. You cannot run forever." The lamp beside him flickered. Thomas dropped the book and backed away. "What do you want from me?" he shouted. The whisper answered slowly, "The key. Return what was taken." Thomas looked down at the key hanging from his neck. Could that be what it wanted? But what would happen if he gave it back or used it? That night, Thomas locked himself in his room again. The brothers Isaac, Jacob, Max, and James were away in the nearby town. He was alone in the mansion. The clock struck midnight. The whispering began again, faint at first, then louder. The voice came not only from the hallway but from the walls, the floor, and even the ceiling. "Thomas, keeper, you have what belongs to me." He covered his ears, shouting, "Leave me alone." The key around his neck grew hotter and hotter until it burned his skin. He ripped it off and threw it onto the floor. The moment it hit the ground, the house shook. Dust fell from the ceiling, and a deep growling sound echoed from the eastern hallway. Thomas picked up the lantern and ran toward the sound. That door, was shaking violently. The metal handle rattled, and the sound of fingernails scratching from the inside filled the air. He saw something moving beneath the door, black smoke seeping out, twisting like a living shadow. "Stop," he yelled, pressing the key against the door. "Stay where you are." For a second, everything stopped. The smoke froze, the door went still, and the whispering stopped. Then he heard a soft laugh. A voice whispered, "You can't hold me forever, Thomas. When you fall asleep, I will be free." The lantern light flickered again, and the flame went out. Darkness swallowed him. He stumbled backward, clutching the key, breathing hard. The house was silent again, but now he could feel something standing right behind him, watching. He didn't turn around. He didn't want to see it. Slowly, he walked backward until he reached the stairs. He went to his room and locked himself inside once more, sinking to the floor with the key in his hand. He finally understood what being the keeper meant. It wasn't just guarding a door, it was guarding himself from the thing that wanted to escape. And now, it knew his name. Thomas didn't know how long he could last, because in the darkness of Blackwood Mansion, the whispers were getting stronger, and soon, no lock would be enough. The next few days passed in quiet fear. Thomas barely slept or ate. The whispers had not stopped. They came every night, growing louder, closer, more human. Sometimes they sounded angry, sometimes sad. But one thing never changed. They always said his name. Thomas, Keeper, let me out. He had tried everything. He sealed the cracks of the eastern hallway with boards. He placed candles around the door and prayed. But nothing worked. The voice always returned. On the 5th night, Thomas was awakened by a new sound: breathing. Slow, deep, steady breaths, echoing through the corridor. It was not his own. He picked up the lantern and walked carefully toward the eastern hallway. The air grew colder with each step. His breath turned white in the dim light. The walls looked damp, almost alive, as if the house itself was breathing too. When he reached the locked door, he froze. The wood was moving. The door seemed to inhale and exhale, bulging slightly with each breath. Thomas stood there, terrified. He could feel the pull of the key around his neck again, the same strange warmth spreading across his chest. The door wasn't just cursed, it was alive. He whispered to himself, "It can't be real." But the voice came again, low and echoing. "It is real, Keeper. You made it real." Thomas stepped back, clutching his lantern. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" There was silence for a moment. Then a soft, almost human voice replied, "I want to go home." "Home?" Thomas whispered. "Where's your home?" The voice laughed softly. "Where the light does not reach. Beneath your house, in the roots of the tree." Thomas's eyes widened. The whispering tree behind the mansion. The same one his brother Isaac had told him about. It was said that the tree was planted the day their ancestors built the house, the day the curse began. He remembered the old journal again. One line flashed in his memory. The creature beneath the tree must never be freed. The door is its heart. Thomas realized it then. The thing behind the door was connected to the tree outside. The door wasn't just a barrier. It was a seal, holding back something ancient and powerful. He needed help. He couldn't face this alone anymore. The next morning, he sent a message to his brothers, asking them to return to the mansion immediately. But the messenger didn't come back. That night, the whispers started again. But this time, there was more than one voice. "Keeper, you called them. You shouldn't have." Thomas ran to the hallway. The door was shaking violently again, but something new caught his eye, a crack near the bottom. From it, dark mist was seeping out, spreading like smoke. He knelt down and tried to seal it with wax, but as soon as he touched it, he heard a heartbeat, loud, deep, and coming from inside the door. Thump, thump, thump. He stumbled back, dropping the key. The heartbeat grew faster, louder. Then silence. Thomas stood frozen. He could feel eyes watching him from behind the wood. And then a hand, a black, twisted hand, slowly pressed out from the crack, fingers stretching through the air like smoke. He screamed and ran to grab the key. The moment he touched it, the hand vanished, sucked back into the wood like it had never been there. The heartbeat stopped. Panting, Thomas leaned against the wall. "It's breaking free," he whispered. "The seal is breaking." He looked down the hall, his lantern trembling in his hand. The air around him shimmered faintly, as if the house was alive, breathing with him or against him. That night, Thomas locked himself in his study and opened the journal again. On the last page, written in his grandfather's handwriting, were the words, "When the door breathes, the end is near. The keeper must return the key to the roots. Only then can the curse sleep again." He looked out the window toward the ancient tree, its twisted branches swaying in the cold wind. He knew what he had to do, bury the key beneath the tree. But he also knew the voice would not let him go easily. As midnight neared, he prepared to leave the mansion. He held the key tight and whispered, "I'm ending this." But just as he reached the main door, every candle in the house went out. The voice spoke again, louder than ever before, filling the entire mansion. "You cannot end what you are part of, Keeper. You are the door now." Thomas screamed and fell to the ground as the key burned in his hand. His body shook violently. The air filled with whispers, hundreds of them, circling him like a storm. And then silence. The mansion stood still once more. The locked door at the end of the hallway stopped breathing. But somewhere deep inside the walls, something new began to breathe instead. 3 days passed. No one had heard from Thomas. The mansion stood silent, its windows dark, its garden covered in fog. The villagers whispered that strange lights had been seen at night, red and flickering, coming from the east hallway of the Blackwood mansion. Isaac, Jacob, Max, and James finally returned. They had received Thomas's message, but too late. When they entered the old house, the air was thick and heavy. It smelled of iron, ash, and something rotten. "Thomas," Isaac called out. His voice echoed down the hall unanswered. The brothers moved carefully through the mansion. Everything was just as they remembered, except colder. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, the wallpaper was peeling, and faint symbols were scratched into the walls, symbols none of them recognized. Jacob looked uneasy. "This place, it feels wrong," he said. Max nodded. "Thomas wouldn't leave without telling us. Something's not right here." They found Thomas's room first. The door was open, the window shattered, and the bed was untouched. On the floor lay an old lantern and several burned-out candles. But what caught their attention most was the black key, lying in the middle of the floor, covered in blood. Isaac picked it up slowly. The metal was freezing cold, and the moment he touched it, he heard a faint whisper in his ear. "Keeper." He dropped it instantly, his eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" he asked. James frowned. "Hear what?" Isaac's breathing quickened. "Someone said, Keeper. It was right here, next to me." Jacob shook his head. "This house is cursed. We should leave now." But Isaac couldn't. "No." Thomas asked for our help. "We can't leave him." They began searching the mansion room by room. In the study, they found Thomas's lantern and the open journal. Jacob read the last page aloud. "When the door breathes, the end is near. The keeper must return the key to the roots." "What does that mean?" James asked quietly. Isaac stared out the window, toward the dark outline of the ancient tree behind the house. "The roots. Maybe it's the tree." Before they could discuss more, a sudden thud came from the eastern hallway. Then another. And another. Thump, thump, thump. They froze. "It's coming from the locked door," Max whispered. The 4 brothers walked slowly toward the sound. The air grew colder. Their breath turned white. The closer they got, the louder the knocking became. It was like something massive was trying to escape from the other side. When they reached the hallway, they saw the door, the forbidden one. It was covered in deep cracks and scratches. Black smoke leaked through them, spreading like veins across the walls. "Thomas," Isaac called out again. "Are you there?" The knocking stopped. Silence. Then a voice. Soft, trembling, familiar. "Isaac, help me." It was Thomas. The brothers looked at each other in shock. "He's alive," Max shouted. Jacob stepped closer. "Thomas, we're here. Open the door." But the voice whispered, "No, you must open it. I'm trapped." Isaac hesitated. "Wait, something's not right. Why doesn't he open it himself?" James pointed at the lock. "It needs the key." Isaac stared at the key in his hand. It felt heavy again, vibrating faintly. His instincts told him not to do it. But hearing Thomas's weak voice broke his heart. "Please," Thomas said again, softer this time. "It's so dark in here." Isaac turned the key in the lock. The moment it clicked, a deep rumbling sound filled the mansion. The candles in the hallway went out, and a gust of icy wind rushed through. "Isaac!" Jacob shouted. "Stop!" But it was too late. The door creaked open, just an inch. From the darkness inside, a black mist exploded out, knocking them all backward. The door slammed open fully, revealing nothing but shadows twisting and swirling like smoke. Then they heard it, a scream. But it wasn't Thomas's voice. It was something older, deeper, and filled with rage. The mist spread across the hallway, crawling along the walls like living hands. "Run!" Max yelled. They stumbled back, coughing as the smoke filled their lungs. The sound of footsteps echoed from inside the open room. Slow, heavy, wet steps. Out of the shadows stepped a figure. It looked like Thomas, but his eyes were black, his face pale as bone, and his hands covered in dark veins. "Thomas," Isaac whispered in horror. Thomas smiled faintly. "It's free," he said in a voice that wasn't his. The brothers watched helplessly as the black mist wrapped around him, pulling him back into the darkness. The door slammed shut again, sealing itself with a sound like a dying breath. Silence returned. The key fell from Isaac's trembling hand and hit the floor with a metallic echo. It was no longer black, it had turned blood red. Jacob whispered, "What have we done?" Outside, the ancient tree began to move, its roots twisting under the soil, reaching toward the house. The brothers didn't know it yet, but by opening that door, they had done more than release their brother. They had awakened the thing that fed on keepers, and now it was hungry again. The night after the door opened was colder than any the brothers could remember. The mansion groaned as if the wood itself was alive. Wind howled through the cracks in the walls, and the candles refused to stay lit. Isaac, Jacob, Max, and James sat together in the living room, pale and silent. No one spoke for a long time. The only sound was the faint creak of the floor above them. Finally, Jacob broke the silence. "That wasn't Thomas," he said quietly. Isaac looked up, guilt in his eyes. "It looked like him." "It wasn't him," Jacob repeated. "You saw the eyes. You heard that voice. It was something else, something that used his body." Max stood up, pacing the floor. "Then where's our real brother?" Isaac held his head in his hands. "I don't know, but we have to find him." Before anyone could answer, a deep, rumbling sound came from outside. It was low at first, like thunder, but it didn't fade. It grew. They ran to the window. The ancient tree behind the mansion, the one that had stood there for hundreds of years, was moving. Its massive roots twisted and dug through the soil. The ground around it split open. Red light glowed faintly beneath the earth. James whispered, "What's happening to it?" The branches of the tree bent toward the house as if reaching out. The bark pulsed like veins. Something alive, something dark, was inside it. Suddenly, the lights in the mansion flickered. Every candle went out at once. Then came the sound. A whisper, but louder than ever before. Dozens of voices overlapping, crying, laughing, calling names. And among them, Thomas's voice. "Isaac, help me." Isaac grabbed a lantern and ran toward the back door. "He's out there. He needs us." Jacob caught his arm. "You saw what happened. It's not him. That thing is tricking you." But Isaac pulled free and ran into the storm. The others had no choice but to follow. Outside, the rain fell hard, and the wind carried the sound of crying. The tree stood like a giant shadow in the fog. The soil around it was black and wet, and faint shapes moved beneath it, like hands pressing up from the ground. "Thomas!" Isaac shouted. A whisper answered from the roots. "Here." They looked down and saw something. A shape half buried in the mud. A pale face. Eyes open but lifeless. It was Thomas. Max dropped to his knees, shaking. No, this can't be real." But before they could reach him, the ground trembled. Roots shot up from the soil, wrapping around Thomas's body, pulling him down. Isaac screamed and tried to grab his brother's hand, but it slipped away as the earth swallowed him whole. The ground sealed itself. The glowing red light dimmed. Only silence remained. Jacob backed away, trembling. The curse. The journal said the door was its heart. The tree, it's the body. It's alive. The air grew thick and heavy again. A deep growl came from inside the tree, followed by a voice that made their skin crawl. The keeper has returned. The blood is mine again. The roots burst from the ground, whipping through the air like snakes. One wrapped around Max's leg, dragging him toward the tree. He screamed, kicking and pulling, but the roots were too strong. Jacob and James grabbed him and pulled hard. "Hold on," Jacob shouted. Isaac ran to help, using a broken branch to cut at the roots. With a loud snap, they broke free and the brothers stumbled back. The tree's branches shook violently, and a dark, thick liquid began dripping from the bark blood. It hit the ground with a hiss, burning through the soil. "We can't stay here," James yelled. "We have to end this." Isaac turned to him. "The journal. It said the key must be returned to the roots. Maybe that's how we stop it." Jacob looked at him in horror. "You mean go near that thing again?" "Yes," Isaac said firmly. "If we don't, it'll take all of us." He pulled the blood-red key from his pocket. It was glowing now, faintly pulsing like a heartbeat. The brothers gathered their courage and stepped closer to the tree. The whispers grew louder. The roots twisted, sensing the key's presence. "Closer," the voice hissed. "Give it to me, keeper." Isaac held the key high. "You'll never have it." He plunged it into the base of the tree. For a moment, nothing happened. Then an explosion of light. Red and white flames burst from the ground, and a terrible scream echoed through the night. The roots convulsed, twisting violently. The branches flailed, tearing through the air like arms. The brothers fell to the ground, covering their ears. Then silence. The light faded. The rain stopped. The tree stood still again, lifeless. They looked around, shaking. The mansion's windows glowed faintly, as if breathing a sigh of relief. Jacob spoke softly. "Is it over?" Isaac stared at the key, now black again and cool to the touch. "Maybe," he whispered. "But something tells me the curse doesn't end this easily." As they turned to go back inside, none of them noticed the faint crack forming in the bark of the tree, nor the hand slowly pressing out from within it. The storm had passed, but the mansion didn't feel calm. The air was still thick, heavy with the scent of wet earth and something else, something rotten. The brothers sat together near the fireplace, their clothes soaked, their faces pale. The fire flickered weakly, throwing long shadows across the walls. No one spoke for a long time. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, a sound that suddenly felt too loud. Jacob finally whispered, "We should leave this place. Now. Before anything else happens." Isaac stared into the flames. "We can't. If we leave, the curse will follow us. It's bound to the bloodline to us." James looked up slowly. "Then what do we do?" "Wait for it to come again." Before Isaac could answer, the fire sputtered and went out. The room fell into complete darkness. Then came the sound. A faint creaking, like wood bending. Then a whisper. Not from outside. From under the floor. Max jumped to his feet. "What was that?" They listened. The sound came again, a scraping, dragging sound beneath the wooden floorboards, moving from one side of the room to the other. Jacob picked up a lantern and whispered, "It's under us." The boards beneath their feet began to bulge upward slightly, as if something was pushing from below. The sound grew louder, like many roots twisting through soil. Isaac's voice shook. "It's the tree. It's spreading." Suddenly, one of the floorboards cracked open, and a long, black root shot up into the room. It wrapped around a chair, pulling it down with incredible force. The brothers stumbled back as more roots broke through, crawling up the walls, reaching toward the ceiling. Max shouted, "Run!" They ran toward the hallway, but the roots were everywhere, slithering across the walls and floor like living snakes. The house groaned as if alive. They burst into the main hall. The portraits on the wall shook, and dust rained from the ceiling. One of the paintings, an old one of their great-grandfather, suddenly began to bleed. Red liquid dripped down from the eyes of the man in the portrait, staining the floor. James pointed with trembling hands. "It's him. He started this. He was the first keeper. Isaac remembered the journal. The family's ancestor had sealed the evil beneath the tree centuries ago, using the key to keep it locked away. But now that they had opened the door, the evil was free again. Jacob said, "If the tree is alive, the mansion is its heart now. It's trying to trap us." They rushed up the staircase, trying to reach the attic, the only place left untouched by the spreading roots. As they climbed, black vines burst through the walls, wrapping around the railing. When they reached the attic door, Isaac shoved it open. Inside was darkness, dust, and cold air. But something else was there too, a faint red glow from a corner of the room. They stepped closer and saw a strange wooden box carved with the same symbols from the door in the basement. The box pulsed faintly with light, as if alive. Max whispered, "What is that?" Isaac knelt beside it. "It's what Thomas found before he died." The journal said the keeper's soul was bound inside this box. As he touched it, a whisper filled the attic, Thomas's voice again. "Isaac, you shouldn't have come back." The brothers froze. The voice came not from the box, but from the shadows. Out of the darkness stepped a figure, tall, pale, with hollow eyes and a smile too wide to be human. It was Thomas, but not as they remembered. His body was thin, his skin covered in faint black lines like tree roots crawling under it. Max backed away, terrified. "That's not him." Thomas tilted his head. "You opened the door. You gave it life again. Now you must feed it." Jacob whispered, "Feed it." "What?" Thomas smiled wider. "Yourselves." He raised his hand, and the roots from the walls began to move toward them, responding to his command. They lashed out, wrapping around Jacob's leg and pulling him down. Isaac grabbed an old axe from the corner and swung it at the roots, cutting them apart. The room filled with the smell of rot. Thomas stepped closer, his voice echoing unnaturally. "The keeper's duty never ends, Isaac. You can't destroy what's already inside you." Isaac turned to face him, breathing hard. "If you're really my brother, fight it." For a moment, Thomas's face softened. A flicker of his old self appeared. "I tried," he whispered, "but it's too strong." Then the dark lines on his face spread again, and his eyes turned completely black. "Now it's your turn." The roots struck again, breaking through the floor, wrapping around the brothers. Max screamed as one wrapped around his chest, squeezing tight. James tried to pull him free, but another vine grabbed him too. Isaac lifted the axe again and swung with all his strength, cutting through the roots one by one. Black sap splattered across the walls like blood. "Run," he shouted. They broke free and ran to the window. Isaac smashed it open with the axe, and they climbed out onto the mansion's roof. Cold air hit their faces as they looked down. The entire ground around the mansion was now moving. The soil writhed with countless roots spreading from the tree, reaching out in all directions. Jacob whispered, "It's taking everything." Isaac looked at the sky, dark clouds swirling above the mansion like a storm that never ends. "It won't stop until it has us all." They heard a scream from behind, Thomas standing in the attic window, watching them with hollow eyes. "You can't run from what's buried in your blood." Then, from the center of the tree, a red light shot into the sky. The roots moved faster, crawling up the mansion walls, wrapping around the windows. The house began to sink, the ground trembling beneath it. Jacob shouted over the noise, "Isaac, the box, what if that's the key to ending it?" Isaac looked down at the glowing box still in his hand. "Then we end it now." He threw the box off the roof, straight into the heart of the glowing tree. There was a flash of light brighter than lightning, and a sound like the earth screaming. The roots recoiled violently, the light inside the tree flaring before turning pitch black. Then silence. The mansion stopped sinking. The roots froze. The brothers looked at each other, their faces pale, their bodies shaking. Isaac whispered, "Did it work?" Jacob stared at the tree in the distance. Its branches were motionless. But deep within the cracks of the bark, a faint red glow still pulsed, like a heartbeat waiting to return. Morning came slowly. The rain had stopped, and the forest was silent, too silent. Mist hung in the air like smoke, and the mansion stood half buried in the damp soil. Isaac, Jacob, Max, and James sat near the broken window, staring at the dead tree. For the first time in days, they could hear birds again. It almost felt peaceful. Jacob whispered, "It's over, right?" Isaac didn't answer. He was still holding the old key in his hand, the same one Thomas had guarded all his life. The metal was cold, but it still pulsed faintly, like something alive. James said softly, "We should leave this place before it changes again." Max nodded. "Let's burn it down. Everything, the house, the tree, all of it." Isaac looked at the others. "No, we can't. The curse is inside us now. If we destroy it here, it'll just follow us." The brothers fell silent again. Outside, the fog thickened, wrapping around the mansion like white smoke. Then came the sound. A soft creak from the floor behind them. They turned. The old attic door, the one that had been destroyed during the fight, was slowly closing by itself. Jacob frowned. "That's not possible." Isaac stood up. "Wait here." He walked toward the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the quiet house. Every board creaked under his feet. The air felt colder with each step. As he reached the attic, the door swung fully shut behind him with a loud thud. The lantern flickered and shadows crawled up the walls. In the center of the room, where the wooden box had once glowed, there was now a black mark burned into the floor, shaped like a handprint. Isaac knelt down and touched it. The wood was still warm. Then a whisper filled the room. "Keeper." He froze. The voice was soft, but he knew it instantly. "Thomas. Thomas." Isaac whispered. No answer, only a faint rustling, like wind moving through dry leaves. Then he saw it, a shadow forming on the far wall, stretching taller and darker with every second. Thomas's shape appeared, but twisted. His body was long, his face hidden, his eyes empty holes. "You tried to end it," the voice said, "but it's not over. The roots go deeper than the grave." Isaac stepped back. "What do you want?" Thomas smiled faintly in the darkness. "You already know. Every keeper must take his place." Suddenly, the ground beneath Isaac's feet trembled. Black cracks spread across the wooden floor, glowing red inside like fire. From those cracks, small roots began to emerge again, creeping toward his boots. Isaac ran for the door, but it slammed shut. He pounded on it. "Jacob, Max, help me." The others heard him and rushed up the stairs. When they tried to open the door, it wouldn't move. From the other side, they could hear Isaac's voice shouting, then screaming. Inside, the roots wrapped around his arms and legs, pulling him toward the burned mark on the floor. Thomas's voice grew louder. "The keeper's blood seals the gate. One must stay, so the rest may live." Isaac shouted, struggling to break free. "No, I won't." The light in the attic turned red. His scream echoed through the house, and then stopped. When Jacob finally forced the door open, the room was empty. The black mark was gone. Only the old key lay in the center of the floor. Jacob picked it up with trembling hands. It was warm, just like before. "Isaac," he whispered. But there was no answer. Only silence. The brothers stood in the attic, tears in their eyes, realizing what had happened. Isaac had taken Thomas's place. He was now the new keeper. Outside, the fog began to move again, curling around the mansion, sealing it in. The tree stood motionless, its bark cracked and blackened. But if one looked closely, its roots had started to move again, just slightly. James said quietly, "He's still here, watching." Max looked out the window. "Then we can't leave him." Jacob shook his head. "No, that's what he wanted. We must keep the door locked, always." They walked down the stairs together, their faces pale, their hearts heavy. The mansion felt different now, quieter, colder. Every wall seemed to breathe softly, as if alive. When they reached the main hall, Jacob turned the old key in his hand one last time. For Isaac, he whispered, and placed it inside the metal lock on the basement door. As the key turned, A deep rumble echoed through the mansion. The ground shook once, then went still. The door sealed itself with a faint red glow. The curse was quiet again. The brothers left the mansion that evening, walking down the foggy path without looking back. But as they disappeared into the forest, a faint whisper came from within the house. "Keeper." Inside the attic window, a shadow stood silently, its eyes faintly glowing red. It was Isaac, watching, waiting. And deep beneath the mansion, the whispering tree began to hum once more, slowly, softly, calling another name. The mansion is quiet, but evil never sleeps. Isaac's voice still echoes beneath the floor, guarding what should never be opened again. Will the curse rise once more? Find out in the next terrifying episode. If you love dark mysteries and haunting stories, don't forget to subscribe and stay with us till the very end, because the next secret is already waking.